Welcome to the LowCarbMD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor.
Hello and welcome to the Low Carb MD podcast. Tro, we got another good one here. This has been a long time coming. Dave Wolfe, welcome. Tro, you want to do a little bit more intro for Dave?
Yeah, no, this is going to be a blast. I've been following him on Twitter. I know he does a support group on Thursdays, and he's got a master's in nutrition, and he's a registered dietitian, and certainly sugar certified. I know he's done a lot of work with I'm blanking on her name, Bitten. Why am I blanking?
Bitten Johnson, yeah.
Yes, who we had on the podcast and absolutely loved.
Gosh, they have a dream team out. Gosh, darn it. They have some great people together. This is really exciting.
So we're happy to have you here.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Dave, tell your story, man. Give people a background on like how you, because I always saw you on Twitter and always a positive influence. Like you're really encouraging people and helping people, and you have the critical key to the puzzle, as Tro and I were talking about before you came on. It's really important to really connect with people and understand their motivation and the struggles, the real struggles with addiction. A lot of people say I'm addicted to chocolate, but they don't really mean it. But I have people that are truly addicted, and we're seeing true addiction. So I would love to hear your take on that and your story and how you came to do what you're doing now.
Yeah. So ever since I was a kid, I would come home from school. I would in a parka and like a hat and gloves and a backpack. And with all that gear, I'd run downstairs. I'd hit the pantry. I'd grab like 5 bags of fruit snacks and hide the wrappers. So that was like always present in my childhood. So, and I didn't really understand what was going on. But then later, my mom is a self-proclaimed food addict. She wasn't always self-proclaimed in that way. She kind of started out as I had a problem with food, then I'm a compulsive overeater. Now she identifies as being a food addict. So kind of seeing that growing up and watching my mom work on her recovery, I think really had a big influence on me. And so I think she did her best with the knowledge that she had to provide for us from a nutritional perspective. There was always a salad and a starch and a vegetable and an entree on the table, because that's what the information that people had at the time. And I come from a long line of cooks too. Like my great grandmother was a cook in Eastern Europe, like her village cook. So we have this strong desire to feed people and to help people, but especially with food, which I realize now is a little codependent, but that's been part of my process. So ultimately, I decided to go to culinary school. So I have a degree in culinary arts, and then I decided to get my degree in culinary nutrition, so that I could combine the service of helping others with the service of cooking and food. And then as a last minute decision, I decided to get my master's in nutrition and become a registered dietitian. And then I entered the workforce, and I really realized that there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of limitations to what we can do. I started out working in an intensive care unit in Atlantic City, and I couldn't help people the way I wanted to. A lot of them were intubated, and so pretty nonverbal. So, but then I entered into working in a bariatric setting, and so they're working with food addicts that don't know they're food addicts, right? So that there's a lot of red tape with that, with getting people pushed through to this window where they're allowed to have surgery, and there's a lot of red flags there. Especially with kind of my background with addiction, just growing up with it, kind of knowing what to look for, being able to call people on their food lies. I remember situations where people would be, they'd be like, I'd give a bread, and then you'd list off a couple things, and then you'd say pizza, and they're like, oh shoot, he got me, because I think like they do, because I'm one of them. So I think that was a big part of it, and just not being able, with the way the medical system is, it doesn't really understand addiction, and especially with food. So anyway, then I moved on, and right now I work part-time in a nursing home, and that's sort of my day job. And then kind of by night, I help food addicts. And so what kind of brought me into that field was I went to a program run by this woman named Esther Helga Gudmundsdottir. She's from Iceland, and she has this counseling school to train food addiction professionals. And I was doing the training, and she had me fill out like a questionnaire prior to starting the course. And she basically told me that it looks like on paper, like you're a food addict. And I couldn't refute it. Like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We know there's genetic disposition, and we also, I know my behaviors. I would come from work. The first thing I would do is hit the pantry. Or wake up in the morning and on my way to work to go help bariatric patients, I would like grab 2 cookies, start heading upstairs to go to the shower, and then I turn around, grab more cookies, and then go in the shower. So like in the addiction world, we call that an eye opener. If you need to you need to hit your drug or stuff in the morning before you do anything else so you can open your eyes, that's addiction. So it really, I couldn't refute it. There was no denial left. So then I just kind of started on my journey and spent the majority of my energy trying to connect with food addicts and working on my own recovery, and then working to help build sustainable recovery for other food addicts.
Yeah, I mean, that's and this has been a growing field. So if you've kind of been in the nutrition space for as long as you have, that, if you go back to 2010, I mean, this was even before the Yale Food Addiction Scale was published. So it's this field has really blossomed in the last, I'd say, 10, maybe 15 years with the advent of functional MRIs. I think, food addiction science has really, in the last 15 years, really blossomed. Certainly, we understand the functional side of addiction. Can you tell me a little bit about, you mentioned kind of your own struggles as a kid. You mentioned hiding wrappers. I've certainly been there. Hiding wrappers, sneaking food. Can you give people an idea of, I mean, if not yours, but the types of behavior that is common in food addiction? Because I think some people get it. Like, I know what you're talking about, hiding wrappers. I would, kind of try to make it look like I didn't eat as much. I'd leave just a little bit in the bag so I wouldn't finish the whole thing. All these behaviors, maybe I would, leave a wrapper in the box to make it look like as if, I didn't eat all of the ice cream bars in the box. Or, there's a lot of these behaviors. Can you talk about some of these behaviors, maybe in yourself, maybe you've observed, so people understand? And then can you talk about the mentality behind it? What's going on? Why did I do that? Right? Why did I hide my wrappers?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, one of the ways I use to explain this to people is like, there's like guilt, which is, I ate something, I feel bad. And then there's like debate, well, should I not eat this thing, right? And then there's the romance. So I think that addicts really connect with that like romance piece. And I think it's hard for people that aren't necessarily addicted to grasp that. But it's really like a rendezvous. It's like I'm meeting my secret lover, in a secret place, and no one knows about it. And then, so it's often behaviors like you go to the drive-through, and then maybe you binge in your car, and then you get rid of the evidence on the way home in like a public trash can so it's not found out. Or things like hiding. I think a lot of it has to do with the thinking process about when we're in the act, right? So like I'm on my way to the grocery store while I'm telling myself not to go to the grocery store because I know what's going to happen if I go to the grocery store. So I think it's the thinking that's behind it, and the way that the brain is hijacked, that we literally are trying to exert willpower to not do this thing that we can't stop ourselves from doing. And then what's the second part of the question?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess the different types of behavior you observed. So either in yourself or others. So for example, I'll share with me, hiding wrappers was commonplace. If I went out to fast food, I'd, throw everything out of my car into the garbage before I got back. So if anybody came into my car, they wouldn't see those wrappers. I'd rearrange the chairs in the Titanic, I'd call it. That's if I have a box of some sort of food, what I'll do is I'll kind of bring up the Oreos to the front of the tray, so it doesn't look like I ate all the back of the tray. So just silly things like this. I'm trying to think of other things that I've done.
So you weren't
You smooth out the ice cream so it doesn't look like, it slowly goes down inch by inch, right?
Yeah.
All those kind of things. There's so much of that. And, I think
I had a client come to me with this scenario where she would have like hidden half gallons of ice cream in the bottom of her freezer. And then she'd have one on top and she'd refill the one on top with the ones on the bottom. But she'd literally like have to remove half of her chest freezer to do this. And she would do it daily. So
and it shows you the true addiction. Like Tro and I, when we started talking about this going back, like episode 13 was our first time we really talked about it. And it was very controversial at the time. And then to hear all of you people saying, hey, look, here's what we're seeing clinically. Because I think a lot of doctors don't get it. And when you raise this whole cross addiction thing, you start realizing, especially you working with bariatric patients, Rob Zivis, Ariel Ortiz, these guys see it. They go, look, I'm killing your best friend when I do surgery because now you can't go home and eat a gallon of ice cream when you're mad at your husband because your stomach is gone, right? You can't do that physically. So tools, right? Then we see all these other addictions going up and up and up. And what Tro and I are saying is clinically, when we get the underlying problem better, they do better, and they're not having all these cross addictions happening. As a matter of fact, the crazy thing that we're seeing is people's other addictions start. They go, yeah, I'm not drinking as much. I'm not as stressed as I used to be. I used to come home and be stressed, and then I'd want to eat something or drink. And, and then the other thing I think is really important is this shame thing, where some guys in particular, if you look at some of the studies, are saying they go out and drink beer and have pizza one night. They go, okay, I had a good time. I don't feel bad about it. I'm back on the wagon tomorrow. And then other people are off the rails for 6 months.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so hard to explain it to people that aren't yet ready to understand. And I think there are a lot of people that just don't want to understand for whatever reason, whether it goes against everything they've learned up until this point or what. I think that it's a major issue. And the other thing, you're talking about cross addiction, right? So let's say you're a baby, you're by the time that you're 6 months, you've probably already been introduced to sugar, right? So you have no concept of emotions, you have no concept of feelings, but you have a concept of reward from that substance. And so you don't even know about sadness or happiness or sorrow or any of that, but the substance already been introduced and it's already triggering your reward system. So then once we start to bridge the gap, when we start to understand feelings and then we understand the reward and then we start to put it all together, we're getting the reward from the substance. It starts to create major problems. And so in terms of like what we call addiction interaction disorder, which is essentially what Tro's talking about, switching seats on a Titanic, right? So the ship is sinking, whether I'm using alcohol, cocaine, meth, or sugar, we're just switching addictions. And so for me, food is usually the primary addiction, right? So it's usually the one that the person is introduced to first. So even when we see people who are recovered alcoholics and they're saying, well, I switched from alcohol to sugar. No, you didn't. You switched from sugar to alcohol, back to sugar. So we're actually trying to treat the primary addiction. And that's why they struggle so much to get rid of it. I think it's because it's been with them most of their lives, if not all of it.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that I find very interesting kind of about addiction is this ability to transfer. And we see it certainly. We've had Ariel Ortiz on the podcast. We've had bariatric surgeons talk about it. Right around 1 to 2 years, we see the alcohol use disorder go up. And with food, I think it's really easy to see with food addiction. If you take away the bread, for example, pizza comes back. If you take away, it's funny. A lot of patients in our practice, after being years low carb and doing excellent at being low carb, they find that their reward for fat goes up. And it's funny, we had I was commiserating with a patient of mine who said, okay, I'm gonna, trying to reduce my cheese this week. I have she said she couldn't control cheese, eats a lot of cheese. Cheese is one of those problem foods. So she removed the cheese, and then mascarpone came back, and then full fat yogurt came back. So it was like this weird, addiction. Well, I don't want to say addiction, but that maybe that reward system will find a way to get that reward. So, I'm just curious, have you seen this, how have you seen this played out? If you're focusing on addiction, I'm sure you've seen other things pop up. And what have you, I've seen gambling pop up. We've seen, pornography use. We've seen, compulsive shopping. So we've seen a lot of these things kind of present themselves, and they're usually a manifestation of anxiety. But, what have you seen?
All the things you're talking, I'm just standing here nodding for those who aren't looking at me right now, but all these things happen, right? And so it's just a matter of, it's almost like the mind is trying to protect itself. So it's just inserting substitute after substitute after substitute, like you're talking about with the cheese and the yogurt and all that. It's just a replacement to whether it's what we call euphoric recall, which is like, it's kind of like Hello Darkness, My Old Friend, that song it says here my internet's unstable. You can still hear me?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, I just cut for a second.
It's cutting in and out here and there.
We're good. It's perfect though. It's all right.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's like a major issue. And so that's one of the problems when you just single out addiction as a disease around a specific substance, right? So like if we're just talking about treating addiction and treating food addiction, right? So then but we need to look at it more globally. We need to treat all these things at once because they're just manifestations of the same problem. It's not as if we should be treating your alcoholism and then we should treat your sugar addiction. No, we just need to treat your addiction because they're all tied in together to the same thing. Whether that's anxiety for someone, whether it's biochemical, I think most addicts have anxiety. There's no question about that. I think that's probably a common thread, and their response to stress is, let's say, different than what I call earth people, like people that are non-addicted. So I think that we have to look, at the whole puzzle, right? So because otherwise we're doing a complete disservice to someone because then they're not fully abstinent or clean because there's still these behaviors that are still tapping into that reward center. And really what happens when we tap into that reward center is it almost like resets back to its default. It almost goes as if you made a ton of progress. It just gets wiped out. And you kind of have to feel like a beginner again.
So Dave, what's your feeling with someone like Rob Zivas saying, look, you've got to substitute this, like if you're taking a cookie break at work, you have to find something else to fill that space or fill that. Otherwise, you're always going to have that addiction, meaning some people have green tea rather than going and getting a sugary coffee drink or having, sparkling water at their desk. How do we practically help people with that as far as like, okay, every day at 4 o'clock, I have to have cookies to get through my day because I get stressed because I don't like my boss and people yell at me all day. And I've seen that trough, and people are doing great. They have half a cupcake as someone really upset them at work, and they just naturally go to that. Like nurses, especially, I see that a lot.
Right. So I think we have to bridge the gap, especially in the beginning for people. So I think things like that are really helpful. I think long term, though, they become crutches. And if you were to, let's say you had a broken leg and you were to use crutches for like 3 years, your crutches would break, right? It's naturally, it's not built to sustain that sort of workload. So I think it's kind of like when people are coming off of sugar, oftentimes they sort of use sweeteners as if they were methadone, right? So it's like a maintenance program. You're going to use sweeteners for a while, but the sweeteners can also become a problem if they're not a problem already. So I think we have to take a look at the crutches and like, what is the goal of it? I mean, if the goal of having like, is there a harm in having green tea? Well, I think it depends on a person, probably not. But if it becomes habit forming, then we need to look at it honestly. But I think it depends.
You know what?
I
can't agree more.
Situation.
I can't agree with you more right now. I can't agree with you more. I can design a person where that green tea is not good. right? Take somebody with atrial fibrillation, palpitations, right? And they're already drinking enough caffeine in other sources. And like that extra little hit of caffeine is not going to help them, right? Or somebody with, I mean, you can design a person, we can imagine a person where more green tea is not helpful. But you know what? 99% of people in the society, if they drink green tea instead of snacking at work, right, that's going to help them. Right. So, I'm 100% with you here. And, you may use green tea, for example, early on, you may use tea as a methadone or as a way to help you fast longer. It may not always be the right answer for you. At some later point, it may be something you have to reconsider. And I think the only way to know that, it's kind of like, Brian, you've always brought up that example of getting a flat tire. If you get a flat tire, what do? You get out, you jack the car up. If you can't call AAA, you put the spare tire on the donut. Well, is it appropriate to use a donut? Absolutely. What are you going to do? Like break your rims? Absolutely not. Right? You're not going to drive around without it. So telling a person not to use a donut if they need it, that's a terrible, terrible idea. But then what happens if you're using that donut every single day? Or let's call it a low carb donut. It's probably not going to help your car out, right? At some point, you got to take that thing, reevaluate it, say, I got to get my spare tire off. I got to get my good tire back on. Right, Brian? I mean,
yeah, and I think that's
you've said that so much, right?
Yeah, and I think the thing is realizing, and I think here's the problem. Like you could be like Rob's a hard liner. Rob Zive is a hard liner. He goes, look, because he struggles with addiction, and then other people go, look, if I'm in, like I tell my patients right now, I go, hey, when I'm in Guatemala in the jungle and this lady makes me a homemade tortilla, probably gonna have one. I haven't had one for 4 months, but I'll have one there, and I'm not gonna be rude. But I think for a lot of people saying, hey, look, because what I find is most of the time I pass it up anyways, because it's not a huge deal. Like, I just gave a talk to a men's group and at Foothills. Thanks, guys. It was fun. But these guys were all eating donuts and pancakes, right? And like, they're like, doesn't it bother you? Don't you want it? I'm like, I don't even eat early in the morning, but it wasn't like willpower. I looked down and go, I just don't want it. I don't feel right. It's going to mess up my sugars. I know the implications of that. And it loses that luster. I think the other thing is a lot of people right now during COVID, everyone's gaining weight. Not everyone, but most people are gaining weight. And we're tied in the, going against the storm because we have people losing weight at the same time everyone else is gaining weight. Why? Because they're dealing with their stress, they're dealing with their emotions in a different way. And I think that is a huge part of it, is having peace, having a comfort somewhere outside of food that helps you to have peace. Like if you say, look, I'll be nice to someone to help them, you feel good about doing that. You're nice on Twitter, Tro. Then you feel good about yourself. You've done something good that day. And I think a lot of people, that's the hard thing, is their reward has always been like all of us, even me with my kids. And when they were growing up, we would go get a Slurpee after we went for a hike because it was non-fat. And no one thought, all that sugar is probably not good, but it was non-fat, right? So that was the reward. So there's no, so even when we hike now, they go, remember, Dad, we used to go get a Slurpee all the time back in the day? I'm like, yeah, we used to, right? That's done. But I think there's so many things like that that we're trying to grasp onto those easier times when everything was peaceful and kind, and like you could just watch cartoons and not have to worry about paying bills and doing stuff. And so people go back to that. You see the spike in sales of all this terrible processed food because that's their comfort.
Yeah, I think that we use the terminology in position of neutrality, right? So when you're at that men's group and now, right, you're in a position of neutrality against pancakes. I don't know what your position is 10 years ago, but it probably isn't neutrality. So we enter into this place in what I call recovery, right? Is a safe place for me, where I just had my kid just turned 2 at a big birthday party. There's food, drugs all over the place, but there's no desire for me to eat them, right? Because I can play the tape through. I know what happens if I have a piece of cake. I don't eat a piece of cake. I don't eat a piece of anything. I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't have those skills. So I can play the tape through, and where do I get? A guilt, shame, remorse, upset, and possibly trapped in an addictive cycle. And I don't want to go there.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. I don't have those skills. Right. And one of the things I work with my patients to understand is what you can and cannot do. Right. Can you give it up? Give it up. If you can't give it up, find a replacement.
Right.
Find a replacement right now. Right. Because what you're doing is not working. What I'm really interested in, and Brian, I think you hit the nail on the head here. there's always an underlying cause, right? It's a need for comfort. There's a need for, there's no calm. There's a stressed brain, right? I've never seen anybody, is, kind of focused about their results. They're have a great mindset, and they screw up their diet. Very rarely, maybe 1% of the time, like, I was on vacation, I felt great, and they allowed themselves a little something and things went wrong. It's always when they're stressed out, anxious, not in that place of, needing a place of calm and not able to find it, right? And not able to find it. And that's when the wheels come, that's when the whole thing kind of goes haywire. So I'm curious, Dave, how do you help people, in the acute situation? Do they call you up and say, Doc, or no, here, not, well, Dave, help me out. I'm about to eat at, Pizza Hut, or are they calling you after the fact? Or, how do you interact with people who are highly addicted to processed food?
So the first thing I'll say is that, which is interesting, right, is they do really well normally in these like high stress situations like weddings or like holidays. It's the day they get back. It's that they've used up so much steam, willpower, mental force, resilience, and then their guard is totally down. Whether that's just the fact that they're exhausted or they're just not ready. I see that all the time. The thing, unfortunately, oftentimes people reach out after, but there's also this shame element. So it could be days or weeks, months before they're like, I slipped and I didn't call you. And I think that's just the disease. I think it just, Bitten talks about the red dog and the blue dog, right? And the red dog is sort of the disease and the blue dog is your recovery. And it kind of comes down to that old Native American story about like, which the wolf wins, the one you feed wins, right? So, but when we're active, we're feeding the red dog and we don't even realize we're feeding the red dog. So the blue dog's just like kind of looking at us sadly, just like waiting for us to be like, give him a bone, because he's just watching us kill ourselves. So I think it's always back to basics. And I think even people who have long time clean time, long time sobriety, regardless of what the substance is, they focus on the basics, like daily, every day, they focus on the basics. I think the community piece is massive. It's going to be a lot easier for a fellow addict to tell a fellow addict something as opposed to tell their dietitian or their coach or their doctor. It just is. And so having that daily interplay, I saw someone on Twitter was curious about relapse prevention, and like, I think the best thing you can do to prevent relapse is stick to the basics on a daily basis, whether that's planning your meals or calling ahead to restaurants, whether that's stocking up your fridge right, whether that's doing some prayer and meditation to keep you grounded, whether that's talking to addicts throughout the day, whether that's going to a weekly group. But just the basic stuff is what carries people forward. And we get all into this like complex, like relapse prevention strategies, and they do work, but most of them revolve really around community. And basically one of the most successful relapse prevention models is that you tell a group of people what a risky situation that you're about to enter into, whether it's like I'm traveling to Hawaii or whatever it is, and then you get the feedback of the room. And they say, well, if I was in that situation, I'd do this. And so you get like 20 outlooks, and then you choose your game plan based on all those perspectives. I mean, that's more helpful, honestly, than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, is knowing the individual, right? I think that's what it comes down to, because it's that individual. Because someone gives up smoking, for instance, the most dangerous cigarette's that first one, right? Because it's either going to trigger you and you're going to have that desire again, or sometimes people smoke one and they go, oh man, it tastes terrible, I don't like it anymore, and they realize. And so even for us, Tro, and I know you see the same, as sometimes people, like, as one of my favorite patients actually at the Super Bowl, she goes, you know what, I'm just gonna have like 10 Doritos and that's it. And she was on the toilet the second half. She felt like garbage. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm never ever doing that again. And she learned. So I could have told her that's bad for you. And she's like, look, natural consequences, right? And her sugar spiked, everything got jacked up, and she felt terrible. So I think sometimes when that happens, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But what I find is, And Tro, you see this early on, people will say, oh, I couldn't resist that cupcake that was there. And then they'll come back later and go, hey, you know what? Everyone's eating like just yesterday, a patient of mine, she goes, everyone's eating cupcakes and donuts. I looked at them like I had zero. It wasn't like I was using willpower. I just had zero desire because I feel so good right now. I don't want to screw it up. So when they say that, it's like, that's like the angels are singing, right? You feel so good. You're like, and the other important thing, Tro, I learned this from Tro early on is look, the two biggest things for failure are lack of family support and high stress levels. These two things, and we know because if you're a stress eater, what do? You're stressed. And this is where you hear the calories in, calories out. Everyone fights over this stuff. But the reality is, you know, when you have support, when you have another thing you can lean on, say, I'm gonna, you know, you can't watch your diet. And this is what happens all the time. All the time people come and go, how many cheat days do I get a week? Like that's the first thing on their mind. Like, oh, this is not going to go well, because that's what you're thinking about. Because this is not about looking good for the wedding in 2 months. This is about a lifestyle. You have to make a change because you cannot lose it and then go back to your old ways, or you destroy everything you've done.
The other thing is, I think that when people are active in their addiction, or even if they're not, if it doesn't appear active, but it's still kind of playing with their head, they can't remember what happened to them the last time they did that thing that they weren't supposed to do, right? So we say chronic forgetter, like we have a chronic forgetter. And so how do we remind ourselves about that is we integrate with other people who have the same problem that we do, because they remind us. So people that have been doing this a long time, like they need the people that are struggling to remind them what happens when I eat 10 Doritos. Yeah, I don't know how to eat one of anything. Like I said, I mean, if that happened to me, I'd probably be sick. Is still eating Doritos. So, because that's how sick I am.
Yeah, I think the brain is a marvelous thing. Brian, I'm with you. There's some people who do that and they're like, I never want to do that again, and they learn, right? But you know, the other thing that I've seen, the opposite end of what I've seen is, people will let their brains, you know, like convince them, kind of like the little devil and the angel on the shoulder. They'll just start listening to the devil, and it'll be insidious. It'll be like, oh, you just did a little bit, go ahead and do a little bit more. And then once they did a little bit more, it's like, oh, this tastes really great. You know, you'll do it tomorrow, right? You'll start back tomorrow. You'll go back to, you know, your diet tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, now they're 3 pounds heavier, right? Because they put it on water weight. And they're like, you know what? You'll just, you know, you did it yesterday. You'll start next week. Just get it out of your system. Right. And then
you kick it to the curb all the way down, like January 1st. Right. That's it. I'm doing it then.
Well, it's not just that. Then it becomes, oh my God, now I gained 10 pounds. I'm going to have to lower my carbs again. I'm going to have to intermittent fast. This is going to take so long. And then it's that learned helplessness. So first it's the rationalization of the addiction, right? It'll just somehow get you on with logical things. I used to be 350 pounds. I would eat my kids' leftovers and I wanted to lose weight. How does that make sense, right? And I logicked my way out of it. I told myself, you know what? Don't waste food. It's a waste of food, right? So even your logic can be abused against you in that kind of state. Your emotions, like, you know, feeling guilty, feeling shamed, embarrassing, eating by yourself, right? These emotions can be used against you. So our logic, our reasoning, our emotions, these all can be kind of used by our brain to get us to keep eating. And then once we're there, and even we recognize it's something wrong, we have that learned helplessness. It's like, we might as well give up, you know? You might as well.
And then you don't want community. You just go, I'm just going to disappear somewhere. That's why the accountability is so critical, because if a friend doesn't show up at church for a month, you go, oh, let me give him a call and see what's going on, right? Like, because he's got something going on, or someone who's not going to Weight Watchers, or someone who's not going to Alcoholics Anonymous anymore that was really high up. So you start realizing, you know, the tool we have, Tro, is the continuous glucose monitor, because that's an instant lie detector test, right? I mean, you see that. And so when I see someone not have readings all day, I'll go, what's going on? Like one of my ladies, she just lost 6.8 pounds in the last week and a half or so. She was not reading her sugars during the day because she's an ICU nurse. I know you're listening, love you. And she stopped grabbing to the candy jar when she was stressed out. And now she goes, I go, does it bother you? She goes, no, it doesn't even bother. I don't even think about it anymore. Like every day that was her go-to for stress relief. But then she goes, now I just go for a walk around the building, or I go up and down the stairs a couple of times. Now she has people in the ICU that go up the stairs and walk up and down with her, and they do something rather than sitting there and eating candy and complaining about their life. Yeah, right. So I think making those steps, it's huge. And I think the big thing is, look, like you make that great point, Tro, is like, you know, some people have one drink and they go, okay, that's it, I'm not gonna have more. Other people have one drink and then they end up in the alley because they can't stop and they're gonna drink all night. And I think the important thing is knowing who you are, and it's an individual thing. Because if I have someone who says, yeah, if I have one tortilla, I'm going to be eating tortillas and I'm going to be starving for the next month. Okay, then don't have the first tortilla because you cannot handle that, right? It's not good. You can't have one drink, and this carries over into life, right? Integrity. Once you start lying a little bit, then you have to lie more to cover that lie, and then all of a sudden you're a disaster. I mean, all these things start that way. Affairs don't just happen; they happen because you say, "Well, I'm going to talk to you because my wife's being a jerk, and I need comfort from this other female," right? And then all of a sudden it develops into something. So I think when you say, "Look, I'm the one," like you guys are saying, "I'm the one. I can't have one chip and stop," right? Like if you are, you have to know that about yourself and be honest with yourself about it.
Absolutely. And it took me a long time to figure that out. And I think,
How did you figure that out? How did you figure that out, Dave? You know, I'm sure you help people figure that out now, right?
Yeah, for me, it was a lot of pain. It was just going to the same beehive every day for a long time and just keep on getting stung every time I reached my hand in the jar. You know, it was just, I think pain has taught me more than anything. I think that, and also hearing other people's stories, being able to like sit there like a bobblehead nodding, like, yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, you know, and that's why I think a lot of people come back to podcasts like this, right? There's resonance, you know, it relates to them, it helps them, you know, and so I could commiserate with other suffering addicts, and then I was able to just follow suggestions. Definitely things I didn't want to do. Things that cause short-term pain, but long-term peace, you know, as opposed to what I was doing, which was I was shooting for short-term peace, but ending up with long-term pain.
Yeah, I think convincing, I think the biggest thing is the ability that I've seen is once somebody gets it. So now here you are, I know you do the sugar assessment and you kind of walk people through from childhood to adulthood, going through all of their kind of addictions and its relationship to weight and their relationship with food and other addictions. But once their eyes are opened, you know, it's like eternal vigilance. You know, one thing I noticed, and I've shared this. I was on a vacation. This was a year and a half ago, and it was like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It was like a cruise, a Disney cruise, and I found myself saying to myself, well, you can just eat more frequently, you know, you deserve it, right? You paid for it, right? And then I was fighting those thoughts. And then it was like, oh, it's not going to do anything. It's low carb. You'll eat more, you know, you'll just have more bacon. You'll have more eggs. It's not a big deal, right? I was so amazed at how my brain continually tried to convince me. You know, then it said, oh, you know, other people are drinking and eating and it's their vacation. You know, you can just have another meal, right? Like that. It wouldn't stop. It wouldn't stop. And I just sat back and was amazed at my brain's ability to find ways to convince me to do something that I really didn't want to do. I was like, I don't need to eat. You know, I don't need to eat more. Anyway, I found that process amazing. And this was like 6 years into dieting and weight loss. I mean, it's still there. I don't ever think my brain's ability to find ways to make me eat is going to go away, right?
No,
so now
probably.
I stop fighting it. I just watch it, you know. So, yeah. But it requires eternal vigilance, and I think that scares people. I mean, how long have you been at this journey? And you know, I think the thing you said here is like doing the basics every day. That really resonates with me. I don't think we're escaping this. I mean, if you figure out a way to escaping it, a shortcut, let me know. You know, yeah, if you got a cheat code to it, let me know.
My brain can rationalize and make anything sound like a good idea. You know, and that's the magic of the addictive mind, right? And you're talking about, you're kind of talking about your thinking and how it kind of just, it subverts and that's what addiction looks like. But I think that's one of the magical things about a brain that's addicted. It's incredible and it's powerful. it is, but on the disease side, it's manipulative, but on the recovery side, it's wicked creative. So it's just a matter of getting to that place where you figure out what your problem is, you come to peace with it, you're at terms with it, and you realize, like, the addicted people I know are the most incredible people. Their minds are just magical. There's something special about it. So if we can harness it, get beyond the trials and the tribulations, and bring them to a place where they're at peace and they're moving through their life, and they're building fantastic relationships. They're doing things that they would never perceived as even possible. It's amazing.
It's that community. Like when I hear Tro talk, as a matter of fact, Tro, I was thinking about you yesterday. One of my patients, she's new. She's a counselor, actually. She's a great person, very nice. And she says, man, I see myself in the mirror and I'm shocked because I think of myself as a thin person. And then I see my body and think, oh my gosh, like it's shocking to her. And Tro, I know you were telling your story that drew me to you about saying, you're running on the treadmill, you have 6-pack abs, and like these guys are talking about the fat guy and you think it's you, right? And you think, and you feel all those feelings of shame and all that. And it's funny how we view ourselves different than everyone else does sometimes. And I think that the importance of community for people to hear that and go, look, you have because again, Dave, the power is that you've struggled with food addiction, all this stuff. If you've been perfect your whole life and never had the addiction, Rob Sive has brought this to my attention. He goes, because I was talking, when we had this discussion, I was arguing against that it's an addiction, that people just like sugar, they just like it. And he said, Brian, when's the last time you craved a cigarette? I said, I don't smoke. I really never crave a cigarette. And he goes, well, just think if you had just quit yesterday. And then you realize, so many of these people who've never struggled with food addiction say it's not real. There's no, because they haven't experienced it. Like I could say there's no alcoholism because I've never struggled with that. So I think that's the thing, is when people experience, they go, yeah, it's true. I would lay in bed and, Rob will tell stories about thinking about M&Ms. He couldn't sleep because he wanted to go and eat M&Ms because he knew they were in the closet, right? He knew they were there to get. And I think that when you start realizing that, and other people go, yeah, I don't need dessert. They don't care. It's not a big deal to them. And other people go, yeah, I don't need to have a cigar, whatever it is. So I think it's that what we struggle with, and having that community of knowing, here's someone else who's been doing it for 3 years. Here's how they did. That's the power of Alcoholics Anonymous and these kind of groups, is say someone, look, this guy was like, my friends go, man, I thought it was bad. I heard this guy's story. I was like, wow, okay. I'm not that bad off as other people are.
Right. If you're perceptive to the message, you're going to hear it. Right. If you're looking for the mess, you're going to find it. It's just a matter of, where's your mind at? But I think that community piece that can gradually guide people from the mess to the message, and that's one of the beautiful things about things like 12-step models and things like that. There's something else I was going to say. Shoot.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things you mentioned here, one, like, I'm not Catholics, but I think the Catholics have something going on. There is something therapeutic about confession. There's something therapeutic about confession, like being able to, in a safe zone, talk about your weaknesses, the things you're being able to bring that out in safety without judgment, right? And like seek out input, right? In a safe environment of people who struggle the same way you do. There is immense value in this, right? So not only are people struggling the same way you are, but they've dealt with it in 20 different ways. When you come to a group coaching kind of environment, or a small group like you have, Dave, this type of environment, you hear 20 different ways of people tackling the same problem. I mean, it's just ideas of success,
well,
and common pitfalls.
And along those lines, I've seen, like, when we filmed Fat Fiction, actually, they said, Brian, go sit down in the back. Don't say a word. We're going to interview your patients. And one of the more powerful things that's ever happened in my life was seeing 5 people up there sitting there and saying their depression, anxiety, stress got better. They feel better. They're joyful again. They felt like a robot before, and they were miserable, and they were a food addict. But when they said, and it didn't make the movie, and I think it was because at that time it might have been controversial, because all of them said their mood, depression, anxiety, stress got better. And for me, it's like, okay, you lose 10 pounds. Does that affect things? No, but when your outlook and you're positive and you're happy again, man, what kind of gift is that for a person, right? To be freed of, it's like, I feel that, Tro, you see the chains hit the ground when people go, yeah, I wasn't even hungry. I didn't eat lunch yesterday. Like before, they would never even consider that. They would just be stressed, thinking if I skip lunch, I'm going to die before. And then they go, oh, it wasn't bad. I actually had good focus. My energy was great. And they realize, oh, it's not as bad as everyone told me it was going to be. So I think that when you see people free of addiction or free of those constant chains of hunger when they go, I'm not even hungry. That's what people who don't understand low carb and keto, they don't understand the power of saying, yeah, I'm not really that hungry anymore. Like people all the time say that, like before they would plan their whole day around their food. I have to eat it too. I have to eat, and now they're like, yeah, if I skip lunch, no big deal. I just eat dinner that night when I get, it's not stressful and emotional anymore. It's just, okay, I'll just do what I have to do.
It's freedom. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that and hope. I think if you give someone hope and go, look, this guy's was a disaster and look what he's doing now. Like Dave, you give people hope, you give me hope and go, look, because you can help people. You can like reach into their brain and go, look, I call that BS card on you now because I know you're lying and you know, it's okay. I did the same thing,
Right,
but you know, you're not a bad person. Yeah, and that's the thing is the point I was starting to make was like, look, if it doesn't matter how intellectual you are, how smart you are, addiction is addiction. So it doesn't matter how smart you are.
Yeah, you can't think your way out of it. It's not possible.
You can't think your way out of it, and you can't logically go, look, like smokers, I could tell, okay, your chance of lung cancer goes out, but they're addicted to cigarettes. Like you have to understand that. You can't say, I'm going to reason you out. Of course they know what's bad for them. Do I need to tell them every time it's bad for them? They got it. I mean, they see it, they know. So I think part of it is that. And I think what I find, and Tro will back me on this, is people who say, look, I want to be healthier and I want to feel like, to me, there's certain golden things I want to hear. First, family support. Husband's in on it, kids are in on it, whatever you're going to do. Two, is that, you know, that the stress, working on stress levels and all these things that stress you, that trigger you to eat or drink or whatever it is. How do we work on those things? And then when people love to exercise, they go, I love to exercise, I just haven't. It's like, oh my goodness, this is like, all we have to do is manipulate these things and get, you know, accentuate this and here, and you'll kill it. So I think it's these things when you start seeing that is really the one person I've had fail that makes me sad. I knew it the first day she was going to fail because she's a diabetic with sugars out of control. And I said, where's your place of peace? Where do you find comfort? And she said, chocolate. She has a husband who doesn't care about her. She has kids who disrespect her. She has no joy in life. She's not helping other people. I'm like, uh-oh, this is going to be a rough one. And we can never find something to replace chocolate for her. And she dropped the program after, you know, 4 weeks or something because she could not. That was her comfort. When her husband upset her, her excuse was, he upset me, so I'm gonna have chocolate. I'm gonna have ice cream tonight. And when you use that as your comfort, you got to figure something out because it cannot be that. It could be going to get a massage. It could be whatever, painting. It could be putting a puzzle. I don't care what it is, but you got to find something else to do.
Ryan, you know what we do, and we don't even give them the chance to go to something that we don't want. You know, this population you're talking about, it's the highest risk. High mental health issues, no support, you know, addiction. But here's the problem: their health is out of control, and we literally give them low carb chocolate. Like, here, you got a chocolate problem, you can't give up chocolate. Here's your chocolate, right? We'll give you low carb chocolate. We'll give them low carb ice cream. Literally give it to them. We have it right in the front of the office. Like, I want to take that person and say, all right, I can at least do this. And then when they do that, they get like this sense of confidence. Like, if I can just control one thing, maybe I can control more, right? And that, you know, that is, you know, this is a problem. This is a problem. Don't listen to me and hear me think that everybody should eat low carb chocolate, because I don't think that. But that person, you know, I feel like that person can sometimes be helped.
Well, and that's the point, is you can't be so hardcore to say, okay, you're never gonna have chocolate again today. That's it. You're done. Like, you know, that's stressful for people. If you go, look, because that's why I tell people, they go, doc, you don't eat bread. They can't imagine that concept. You don't eat keto bread. I go, I don't. I really don't. Because if I'm gonna eat it, I'm gonna eat the real thing. But I'm only gonna eat the real thing maybe once or twice a year, because when I do it, I'm gonna enjoy it. If I'm that person who can have one piece and not worry about it for the rest of the year, right? So I think it's just knowing who you are, because it's the same, Tro. I mean, I totally get that we have to make you have to make whatever's useful. For instance, cold water plunging. Some people go slow in, get your feet wet to come back out, go back in a little bit. Other people say, I'm just jumping in and doing it. So it depends on the person. Some people go directly to carnivore and they crush it because they take that whole sweet thing out of their notion. It's not in their mindset anymore. And they go, this is what I'm eating. Just like a vegan is not going to eat a steak. They just say it's not a temptation. They just don't do that. So I think it's that it's different. I'm learning about different people, and some people are hardcore. I'm like, you're just jumping. You want to fast right the first day? Okay, we could, if you can do that, but I don't suggest it. Here's what we do. Usually it's a natural progression. So I learned a lot of that from you, Tro. And the other huge thing that you say to people, and I've adopted that too, is saying, look, overweight people, the biggest fear they have is being hungry. So they overeat because they're afraid they might get hungry, heaven forbid, right? So I go, hey, if you're hungry, eat, but eat something low carb. Have a hard boiled egg. Have something. Don't eat for a reward. Eat if you're hungry, legitimately. So if you can, like I did, like I told you that, Tro. I had a can of tuna sitting there in my office, in my old office, and I was like, if I'm really starving in the afternoon, I'll eat that. And then it was never exciting for me to eat that because I don't want to just eat tuna out of the can. But if it was for nourishment, legitimately, then I would do it. But it was barbecued ribs. I'd eat like, 2 racks of ribs because you enjoy that. So this whole thing that you talked about, hyperpalatable, all these things that you've thrown out over the years, Tro, are like extremely valuable and true, right? So I think that's what's great. We all take tools from each other and learn and see what works for that person, because some people, you're right, they have to say, here, have low carb. Like that's why I really love Maria Emmerich and her hard-boiled egg pudding, because that takes that edge off, and they're eating protein, they're eating a healthy thing, and they get that sweet tooth, and they go, okay, I can handle that. As long as I can do that, I feel good, right? So it's getting the least dangerous poison you can until you can get to that right point. So I think we all have, it's an individual thing, and I think all these things work.
The other thing you kind of mentioned this concept of hunger versus desire, right? And so if you're not going to eat tuna, then in your example, you're not hungry, right? You want to change the way you feel or think, right? You want a new experience. You want dopamine. You're not hungry. So I think that, but we can get clarity on that we have to learn it, right? And the way that they treated food addicts for a long time is through like what they had information about, which was like low fat, high volume, moderate protein, plenty of grains, vegetable oils, all these things that were really counterproductive. So, and you have people that struggle and struggle and struggle for so long, and they're in the recovery movement, they're in the community, they have the support, they have everything. And for those people, all we need to do is plug them into more of a low carb model, and they fly because they're feeding their brain and they're not feeding their addiction anymore. And I hope that people, and when I say that, I really believe the food is like 5%. It's 5% of recovery, but it's the first 5%. So I don't want to say like, if you're struggling and you identify as having an addiction, or you're compulsive about your food, that you just need to get the food right, because that's not what I'm saying. But when these folks do, they have miraculous results, because they're not fighting cravings and hunger all day long, and they can enjoy the good food, the real food. And so I tell people, if you don't want to eat a piece of meat, you're probably not hungry.
Yeah,
I think that's, go ahead, Tro.
No, go ahead. Age before beauty.
Great gravy for bald, whatever. Hey, so I think one of those things, gosh darn it, Tro, I lost my train of thought. Gosh.
Yeah, I mean, he was talking about that idea of like, if you don't want a piece of meat, you're probably not hungry. If you don't want the tuna, you're probably not hungry. It's a great litmus test. I use it all the time. I think I have to be honest, at this point in my life, it's not that I stopped believing in hunger. I think that there are so many reasons to eat, other than nourishment. There are just too many. In fact, I can name 100 reasons to eat other than nourishment that most people confuse with hunger.
I got my question back, and it goes along with that. That's why, it's like a lot of nutritionists, dietitians, the gym bros, they all say, hey, look, everything in moderation. The problem is they don't understand the addiction problem, because everything in moderation. Do you tell your alcoholics, yeah, just have a drink in moderation? No, by definition, they cannot control alcohol. So the problem is so many dietitians, nutrition, I think they want to be the good parent and go, yeah, honey, you can have chocolate cake for breakfast sometimes if you want, if that makes you feel better. But they don't realize I don't understand how there's such a disconnect with this idea that you have to have everything in moderation. Well, it depends if you're that person who can moderate or not.
Yeah, and the reality is, honestly, that the majority of people can't. I mean, my lens is skewed because obviously people come to me after struggling for so long. I'm like one of the last houses on the street, so to speak. But I think that's a problem. And I heard a client say everything in moderation, especially moderation. So I think that you know, that paints a good picture. I think that people don't see the legal consequences that we associate with drugs and alcohol. We don't see people getting DUIs on donuts. You know, we don't see, we can't get a
It's the
close
opposite. It's the opposite. We encourage it. It's the opposite of that, actually.
It is encouraged. You're right.
You know, so it is encouraged by society to eat these things. It is encouraged by society. It's encouraged by our families. It's encouraged for comfort. You know, after you do heroin, you know, you don't feel, you have to stick a needle in your arm. Imagine you had to stick a needle in your arm each time you ate a cupcake, right? Imagine you had to do that, right? So
some people do throw it. They're shooting insulin to get rid of the cupcake they just ate, right?
That's true. You know, that's
other
true.
than that, they're in so much pain
Yeah.
on like a physical, a mental, emotional, and spiritual level that they don't care. Like they know that they could be dosing themselves with fentanyl and die in the next 5 minutes, and they don't care. They just want that 4.5 minutes of relief.
But there's
That's
no
how
way
much
out.
pain
Here's
they
the other problem. Here's the other problem. There's no way out. There's no way out for them. So you're like, okay, I need this cupcake, you know, but like, what do? I can only have, you know, 2 ounces of red meat a week, and I can only eat, you know, 1 1/4 eggs, because that's, you know, I'm going to get a heart attack, right? So, you know, when you take the problem, which is moderating addictive food, which only 20% or less of society can do, okay, and then you combine it with a food environment and a social culture that promotes eating, and then you give them terrible dietary advice on the other end, you know, it leads to like a prison sentence. And this is why we have, you know, kids being, taken into foster care for obesity, because parents don't even know what to do. You know, they don't understand the problem.
Well,
it's a huge matrix.
And those of us who know we've struggled with it, we've all done calorie restricted diets. We've all done that. And we've all failed it. I see it all the time. And yet they say the same thing, calories in, calories out. We have data that shows, you know, and you know, I've argued the other side of the coin, Tro. Their calories do matter for sure. Obviously, if you put way too much energy in your system that you burn, there's going to be an issue. But the point is what your goal is going in. Like a lot of my patients don't even count their food intake because they're not hungry all the time. So they eat less naturally without saying, okay, now I'm going to, you know, the people who I see fail to also, Tro, are the ones who have like a carb tracker, and they go, okay, I'm going to eat my 50 grams of carbs. I mean, like, and they save it for the end of the day, and they go, okay, now I'm going to reward myself with that, because mentally you got to get out of that state. At some point you have to get out of that state. Now it's good for moderating, but the problem is people think, well, you know, if I have those extra calories, I'm going to eat them. Remember that big weight loss program that said, well, fruit is free. So you're telling a bunch of obese people, pre-diabetic, that fruit is free. Guess what? You have a total disaster. And that's what it turned out to be. That's why fruit is no longer free on these diet plans, right? They realize, uh-oh, this is not good. We're causing a disaster. So I think there's so much of that where we, you know, when it's a perfect example, Rob Zivas, I love Rob. So he goes, look, what's your favorite donut? Glazed. Okay. Say you're about to eat your glazed donut and you drop it and it falls in a pile of dog crap. Are you going to pick it up and eat it and wipe it on your leg and eat it? No, you see it for what it is now. You don't want to eat it. So I think that's what happens. And people look and they go, yeah, I don't feel good. I don't like the effect of that food, rather than having this romantic thing of, oh my gosh, like you said, Dave, romance, like it's a romance thing. Like you're going to go lock yourself in your room and just have your affair with your chocolate ice cream at night, right? Because no one's there and no one can see it. And then you hide the evidence afterwards. You throw it in the garbage. It's this huge pervasive thing where if other people don't see it, it's okay. And I have a lady, I go, I was arguing with her about it. I go, don't waste your money. You're healthy. You're doing okay. You don't need a CGM, continuous glucose monitor. She goes, I do. Because if I know you're going to see it, I will not do it. I won't eat it because I know I'm going to have to tell you what happened, why that spike happened, right? But that keeps her. So is it valuable to her? Yes, it is, right? Because she knows herself. And I think that's what's important, is knowing yourself and us knowing you and building the relationship. That's why what Tro and I do, it's not all science, it's not all magical stuff. It's understanding you as a person and what makes you tick. What are your goals? Do you want to run your marathon in 2 weeks? Okay, then we're going to have to do some intensive training. If you go, look, I'm going to run my marathon in 3 years. Okay, we can ease into the training a little bit, right? What works for you? What's going to stumble you? What's going to keep you on track? And that's our job. That's the magic. The magic is knowing you as a person and understanding this is not a, you know, when people say that we're zealots, it's like you cannot have a one approach to everyone. What we're seeing is very successful because we have a lot of tools that Tro has taught me and I've taught him, and we've we've worked this. And Dave, you were a huge component, man. If we had all three of us together, it would be almost impossible for someone to fail. It would be almost impossible unless, and if they're paying us money because they're motivated, that's the other thing. They say, look, I'm in, show me what to do, and I'll do it. That's Tro, you know, that's our best patient, right? Like, doc, do I got to fast? I'll do it. Like, they get that mindset instead of saying, I don't think I can do it. It's going to be so hard. And I can't have, how often can I have cookies? Well, it's going to be tough, right? You're 350 pounds, so you have diabetes. That's not the best for you. Even if your nutritionist wants to be your friend and says, oh yeah, here, you can have cookies sometimes, just shoot more insulin and you'll be okay. Is that a friend? It's not. They're killing you. I'm telling you, trust me on this one, right?
I can't even wrap my head around it. It's just, it's totally bananas. It's just nuts. And how many RDs do you know that are willing to work with a low carb model? I don't know. I know like 4.
Yeah, I know 4, and they're outstanding, and they're changing lives, and they're killing it, right?
Oh yeah, and that's good. And with Jen Unwin's new book, The Fork in the Road, right? She asked me as a dietitian, she's like, "Will you stand behind this, you know, this low carb as the dietitian?" Absolutely. It works. Where everything else fails, it works.
Yeah.
And you look at the things that we're asking you to eat. It's food. They're single ingredient items. It's real food.
Yeah, I need to grab that. I'm going to grab that book because you all contribute to that, right?
Yeah, we're all, yeah.
So tell people about that, because I want people to know about The Fork in the Road, because I'm going to buy it today.
Yeah, so Jen Unwin just released this book, must have been last week, and she has myself, Anna Freeling, who she's a health coach, keto coach, and recovered person in recovery long term, and Eloise Neely, who's basically a food addict from where's she from? New Zealand, and Georgia Eade, Bitten Johnson, and then a couple people from Twitter. And basically we got together and contributed to this big project. So there's recipes, there's an explanation about food addiction, there's an explanation about how to eat, there's tons of tools, there's resources for things like podcasts and things for people who identify with addiction. But I think really the book's about hope, you know, which is Jen Unwin's, you know, thing, which is important, which is awesome. We all need more hope, and it's available on Amazon. And I think people are really responding to, because we're talking about something that's detrimental and terrible, but in a positive light, you know, and that there's a way out, because there is a way out.
Tro, you better order quick, man. There's only a couple left. I'm already ordering.
I know. I'm going to get the fix for cravings. So that, you know, definitely going to get that one. Well, you know, this has been an absolute pleasure. Mr. Wolfe, would you be so kind to take some questions before we part ways?
Wait, first, Dave, how do people get in touch with you if they want to track you down and they need help?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at triggerfree_RD. I have a website at Trigger Free Nutrition, and we have a brand new project called Sugar X Global. And what that is going to be an online community for food addiction recovery. We're going to be doing treatment through actual treatment, addiction treatment. We're building a 9-week treatment program. So it'll be like an intensive outpatient program you do through your computer. And then we're going to be running groups every day. We're going to have coaching. We're going to have like all the tools. There's 3 of us, actually, myself, my mom, and Anna Freeling, who also worked on Jen Unwin's project. So basically what we've done is we've taken everything that we struggled for to have access to, that's built recovery for us, and we're just putting it on a platter. We're giving it to these people because we struggled for so many years to figure out what would work, and we know what works now. And we're just putting it all out there, and we don't believe in this specific eating pattern, or, you know, we're going to guide people through finding their own way, and kind of creating a system that works for them. Just like you guys are talking about, like, we have a big toolbox. Like, I can't expect you to use all the tools that I use. They're not going to work for you, you know, but they might work for Susie or Ed. So that's what we're about. And that's at sugarxglobal.com. I haven't launched it, but we're going to be launching a 5-day challenge really soon.
Oh man, and
that sounds really cool.
We're going to drag you on. Tro, we got to do some more. Tro and I have really talked about this, but I think now we're going to have a renewed focus of getting some group where my patients and his patients all get together on Zoom, and we all kind of share community. And, you know, I think it would be critical to tie them in with you and have you come and speak with us, and let Tro and I shut up for an hour and you wrap with people, because I think it's so critical. I think people miss this key. There's certain keys I think we miss along the way. One, and Tro, you can start looking at the questions, man. One, we forget the importance of exercise. We import the importance of support. Of being consistent, of all these things, of having support, of having a community. So I think all these things, and the addiction part of it, people miss that part. That's a huge key. Like I think that's probably the biggest part, the mental, psychological part. That is the crux of this, because those of us who became obese and overweight, it's because we had a maladaptive coping mechanism where food became our joy. Because Tro knows as well, Dr. Unwin's talking about this, people cry if you go, okay, no more tortillas. They're like, what am I gonna do? Like, that's my life. Hey, do you like carne asada? Okay, throw a bunch of carne asada on there and vegetables. And here, do you like guacamole? Let's. So I think when you change it, they go, oh, I can have that. Oh, okay, then I'm good. Like, once they realize they can eat, like Maria Emmerich, what she's doing is like awesome, because people go, oh, I can have certain foods I like. Yeah, here, have stuff you enjoy. You don't have to. You're not going to be eating Melba toast and terrible food. You're going to enjoy it. Enjoy the process, right? So that's what I love. And a patient comes back and goes, oh my gosh, this is so easy. I love this. That's like, oh, this is good. We're gonna crush it with you, right? So, Terrell, grab the questions, man.
Just real quick, I run this group on Thursdays. It's at 4 p.m. Eastern. If you're a medical professional who's kind of curious about what is it like to be a food addict, we have someone share their story, and just come for an hour, and I can totally change your mind. I mean, I think that you can hear stories of the struggles from the inside, and then where people are at, whether they're just struggling to get clean or they're really in it. I would open invitation to anyone. You're welcome to join. And I think, again, the community piece, we're all about that. I think that's the only way we ever found freedom, and I think that that's a powerful thing. And the disease is so isolating, and our world becomes so small. And we don't even realize that we're cornering ourselves, and that we can uncorner ourselves, and sometimes we need some help.
I'm gonna absolutely, I can't agree more. So I'm gonna segue right into this important question. What do you say to those who maintain that sugar addiction is not a real thing? And I want to clarify that by saying that to some extent, I believe that the literal term sugar addiction is not real, although I recognize sugar addiction is real, the way that we mean it. I wish we'd call it food addiction. But anyway, to that specific question, what do you say to those people who say food addiction, sugar addiction, it's not real?
So the first thing I do is I do not spend a lot of time trying to convince the unconvincible, because I find that it just keeps my spirits low, and also prevents me from helping the people that are open to the idea. So I learned that from one of my mentors, and so I definitely practice that. I give people an open invitation to come to something like my group, or to listen to a lecture or this, because then maybe they can have some level of identification. And I think, again, it comes down to these consequences, right? So people don't see the consequences other than obesity. But these people are suffering so much, and they can't stop. They just can't, and they want to stop. So how is that not an addiction?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Can I speak to your comment too?
Yeah, sure.
So the reason I use the term sugar addiction is because I think people understand it. I am fully on board with you in terms of food addiction, but in terms of as the vernacular, because people are addicted to food. It's not just sugar, right? But it seems like people are picturing someone sitting there eating like lettuce, like till the end of the earth. And that's not what I mean when I say food addiction. I think it could be sugar, it could be candy, it could be grains. There are people that are addicted to other things too, like fat. I've seen people who have an issue with sodium. It's not very common, but I agree with you in terms of the terminology. But in terms of bringing people in, it seems like they identify harder with sugar because they're thinking about cake, cookies, pastry, pies, processed food.
Yeah, but people don't think about and it's the processed food, right? Because potato chips, people go nuts. Like popcorn, you could sit at the movie and eat a whole tub of that. How many calories is that? So there's all that stuff, but it's the mindless eating. It's all those things that we do, and so those tools are so valuable. Like even for me,
Brian,
right?
Popcorn is minimally processed, my friend.
Well,
it doesn't make it less addictive.
Come here,
doesn't make it less addictive.
Now,
Look
at the.
I got patients that would swim in it if they could.
So would I. I would swim in it.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is minimally
absolutely.
positive, but you add all the fake butter and all this other stuff at the movies and that kind of thing. Air popcorn. Very few people are gonna sit there and munch out on air popcorn all night. That's why I don't see any air popcorn
I could
makers
do it.
out.
Yeah, for sure.
You have to add something good to it. But you're right, Tro.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, this has been an absolute pleasure. That's all we have for today. David Wolfe, listen, I'm a huge fan, absolute huge fan of yours. I love your content online. Looks like you're going to do some very exciting things with this intensive group, which is just needed. It's absolutely needed. So I can't wait to hear more about it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for joining us, everyone. Patreon supporters, everyone out there, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your support. This is something you should share with everyone. This is something that we all struggle with. This is something that is critically important. And I think if you don't think you have addiction stuff, or you don't know people who do, just observe, sit back and look, and you'll see it. And my patients are telling me now they're seeing it in other people. Now they say, I never saw that before. Now I see it. I see the dysfunction. And so I think when you're freed of it and you get, I think of it as a prisoner. Once you're released, you could step outside the prison and look at it. Other people are prisoners of that. But while you're incarcerated, you don't see it. You're just one, just like everyone else. So yeah, everyone, thanks for listening. This is critically important. Dave, appreciate your time. And we will be collaborating. We're going to get some
I look
patients
forward
over
to
to you.
it. I think we
For
can
sure.
change some lives. So I'm all for that.
Absolutely.
And
Our
Tro, everyone wants
purpose
you to
and
close us in
privilege is
prayer,
to
man.
serve. Yeah.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. And we really appreciate all of your support, the Patreon supporters, our group coaching, just everybody. Thank you for bearing with us, and we'll see you guys next week.